Welcome everyone to our Tuesday, February 9th, 2021 Customer Assistance Program Workshop. Due to COVID-19 and in accordance with the latest Alameda County Health Order and with the Governor's Executive Order N2920, which suspends portions of the Brown Act, this meeting will be conducted remotely. In compliance with said orders, a physical location has not been provided for this meeting. These measures will only apply during the period in which state or local public health officials have imposed or recommended social distancing. All members are participating via teleconference. Roll call, Madam Secretary.
Director Coleman.
Present.
Director Katz.
Present.
Director McIntosh.
Here.
Director Mellon.
Present.
Director Patterson.
Present.
Director Young.
Present.
President Lenny.
Here. With regard to public comment, if members of the public wish to speak on agenda or non-agenda items, please use the raise your hand feature in Zoom. Comments on non-agenda items will be heard at the beginning of the meeting. Comments on the workshop presentation will be heard at the end of the presentation. When prompted, please state your name, affiliation, if applicable, and topic. The secretary will call each speaker in the order received. Each speaker is allotted 3 minutes to speak. However, I have the discretion to amend the time based on the number of speakers. The secretary will keep track of time and inform each speaker when his or her allotted time has concluded. General Manager Clifford Chan will introduce the workshop. Take it away, Clifford.
One moment. We have no one on the line for a public comment. Just wanted to make a note of that.
Oh, right, thank you.
You're welcome.
Thank you, President Lenny. Good morning. So we have a lot to cover today in our Customer Assistance Program workshop. If you recall, at last year's CAP workshop, we shared with you our estimate of the number of eligible CAP households with the conclusion that there was room for growth. And what we've seen in the past year is record growth in our CAP program, as many of our customers have struggled with their bills because of COVID. I think the growth is also a result of our targeted outreach, which the board asked us to do last June during our budget and rates workshop. Today's discussion is divided into three main parts. First, we're going to share with you data on the growth in CAP participation and how COVID has affected delinquencies. Next, we're going to share with you a redesign of our customer support program. In the past, we spent a lot of time talking about financial assistance, but our overall support program, which is focused on the customer, includes more than just financial support. And we're also going to share with you progress in our efforts to implement our alternative to water shutoffs. Finally, we know that homelessness is an issue in our service area, and we feel that we can be part of that solution, and we're going to share with you some of our efforts in that area. We have a number of speakers presenting today, and so at this time, I'll pass it on to Andrew Lee, our Customer and Community Services Manager, to begin the presentation.
Well, good morning, President Lenny and Board of Directors. I'm going to share my screen right now to bring the presentation up. Are you seeing the
If you can expand your screen, Andrew, and then you want to start your presentation.
got it?
Okay, that was it, and then it left. So you want to start your present? There you go. We can see your the first page. So
Great. So you can everyone see the present.
yes.
So thank you so much, and welcome to our 2021 Customer Assistance Program workshop. And I just want to start by saying that 2020 has been a challenging year for all of us, and the pandemic have really impacted our customers, businesses around us, and also the community as a whole. The need for financial assistance, obviously, as you can see in the data in the upcoming slide, is increasing. And with your support and the board's leadership, the district was able to respond in an impactful way and brought assistance to many of the affected families. 2020 is also a year that we have made significant progress in terms of growing CAP, as General Manager Chen mentioned earlier. And we were able to add almost 1,300 families to the program. Now, it is also the year the district have made a commitment to keep the water flowing for our single-family residential customers that are having financial difficulties paying the bill by adopting a no shut-off policy going forward. And you will hear more about that and how we're going to implement this new policy later on in this presentation. So also, as the General Manager mentioned, that while the focus of today's workshop is on our CAP activities for 2020, I would like to take a moment to say that our assistance is way beyond on just providing a discount on the water bill for our customers. It has always been our goal to offer a range of programs where all customers can access the help they need to manage the water bill and delivering on our commitment to keep water affordable. So with that, we have a very full agenda for the board this morning. And the format, as the General Manager said, will change a little bit to include additional speakers, so you don't have to hear from me for the complete 2 hours. First, Latrice King, our Contact Center Manager, will provide an update on our 2020 CAP highlights and some of the key activities, followed by Terry Dean Alderson, our CIS Control Manager, who has been doing a lot of work tracking the trend of COVID and how it's impacting our customers. Then Alice Tui, our Manager of Water Conservation, will spend some time to review our redesign of the customer support program, including our implementation plan for the alternative to water shut-off. And we'll look at how that will fit into the overall program. And to close out the workshop, I will provide an update on the progress that we're currently working with the city to bring CAP to the sewer collection charges, as well as some of the effort that is ongoing, working with community group to address homelessness, and ultimately round up the workshop by talking about some of the next steps for the program, as well as looking at developing a sustainable source of non-rate revenue to ensure the long-term success of CAP. So with that, I'm going to pass it on to Latrice King to give you an update on our highlights for 2020.
All right, thank you, Andrew. Good morning, board members and team. My name is Latrice King. I'm the Customer Services Manager for the Contact Center and Field Services. And today I have the pleasure of sharing with you some of the highlights related to the district's Customer Assistance Program. Next slide, please. Slide number 4. In last year's CAP workshop, staff shared that the targeted goal for CAP was 33,000 households. What we've learned since then is that many of our targeted customers either live in a master metered household or do not receive a water bill, deeming them ineligible for the program. But it remains a top priority to continue to proactively explore opportunities and ways to grow CAP, and understanding that there's room for growth. The district has intensified its targeted outreach activities during 2020 in specific communities to increase participation. We'll be sharing some of those outreach activities in the next few slides and throughout the presentation. Next slide, please, slide number 5. Each year, the district follows the recommended HUD standards for the CAP eligibility criteria. The district provides one of the most generous thresholds in the state, which far exceeds the federal poverty guidelines of 200%. This slide shares the current eligible income requirements compared to other agencies who mostly use the federal poverty guideline to set their approval baseline. Considering the higher cost of living in our service areas, we choose to use the HUD standards income levels, which allows more people to qualify for our program. Our CAP customers receive a 50% credit for the fixed and volumetric water charges up to 1,050 gallons per person in the household, and they also receive a 35% credit on their wastewater and flow charges. To participate in CAP, the applicant must meet an income threshold, be the customer of record, and pay their water bill. Customers are allowed to receive the CAP credit for a period of 2 years and can reapply at the end of the term. Customers are notified by mail approximately 2 months prior to the expiration date and are encouraged to reapply if the need still exists. Next slide, please, slide number 6. So we believe that some of the key 2020 CAP activities conducted in the past year have had a direct impact on growing the program. Overall, the CAP participation rate has increased by 19%. The district received and processed over 6,800 CAP applications. We shifted resources, and now applications are being processed within a week of receiving them. And this was possible since we've experienced lower call volumes during the pandemic, which has allowed us the time needed to train other staff members to help process applications. Some reasons behind the lower call volumes may be attributed to the district no longer actively performing water shutoffs. Some customers are afraid to contact us in fear of learning their true balance owed. And some customers are just simply unable to pay their bills at this time. Staff continues to conduct outreach efforts to local agencies to promote our customer assistance program. And we've expanded the Water Life program by working with other agencies and through the employee donation funds. And we understand times are very challenging for most of our members of our community. So we are very proactive in our efforts to avoid water service interruptions and are exploring alternate solutions to avoid water shutoffs. My peer Alice will be sharing a little bit more about those programs later on in the presentation. Next slide, please, slide number 7. All right, so this map here shares a visual of where most of our CAP customers live, which are in disadvantaged communities. The key takeaway here is that the pandemic has hugely impacted customers in our service areas. 85% of our CAP applicants or enrollees are in disadvantaged communities or within a half-a-mile vicinity. We use this map as a tool when identifying which areas to focus on for our outreach efforts. Next slide, slide number 8, please. All right, so this year we've stepped up our outreach efforts about our customer assistance program, and some of those efforts are listed here on the slide, but I'll just mention a few of them. We have distributed more mailers and online publications than ever before. We have also advertised at bus stations and with billboard ads across the community. We've also partnered with food banks, with nonprofits, local schools, and work with several services and city agencies. We continue to make updates to our website in order to bring more attention to the CAP program. And we have dedicated a CAP option on our customer service phone line that is used when customers call into the contact center. Next slide, please, slide number 9. Each year, we continue to see incremental growth in CAP participants. And over the past 12 months, the district has grown CAP by 19%, which is the largest single year jump. More outreach conducted this year and better marketing efforts are just some of the drivers in the uptick of applicants, in addition to those customers who are experiencing hardship impacts related to the pandemic. And it is our plan to continue to inform and promote our CAP program in hopes of growing the program and helping those who need it the most. Next slide, please, slide number 10. One of the key takeaways on this slide is that the growth in CAP participation also means that the district has provided the highest amount of financial assistance to our community in a single year. In fiscal year 20, the district spent close to $2.6 million to fund the program. And the second key takeaway here is that we expect that the cost will rise to roughly $3 million in fiscal year 21. Next slide, please, slide number 11. All right, so it is imperative, we understand it's imperative to maintain CAP growth. And as we focus on growing the program, we will need additional resources, including a comprehensive plan that provides a sustainable funding resource. As you can see from this slide, for every 1,000 new CAP participants, it costs the district approximately $336,000. Reaching the targeted goal of 33,000 CAP participants means that the program will cost the district over $10 million to maintain. So this concludes my portion of the presentation. Are there any questions?
Latrice, what's our, maybe Sophia actually knows this, what is our current non-rate revenue line item? How much, I mean, not for CAP, but overall, how much money do we get from, how much is our non-rate revenue?
I'll turn that question over to Andrew, who probably has a better perspective.
We have a number of non-rate revenue resources. So to provide a complete answer, I think we may have to tally up and maybe send you an update on that. But from just looking at making a comparison to our real estate income, which is one of the sources we identify as non-rate revenue, we generate about a little bit over $4 million a year from long-term leases and other type of real estate activity. So we are covered in that area. But as you can see on what the data Latrice has presented, the rate of growth definitely is outpacing the rate of growth on the revenue side. If I'm looking at the just singling out one non-rate revenue source.
Are there any other questions? All right, if there are no more questions, I will hand this over to Terry Alderson. She'll take it from here. Thank you.
Hey, good morning, everybody. As Latrice said, my name is Terry Dean Alderson, and I am the Customer Services Manager of CIS Billing and Remittance. We have been tracking our payment data very closely, and I have some updates regarding COVID-19 impacts on delinquencies. Next slide. It's hard to believe we are coming around to a whole year since all of this started back in March 2020. The district has always provided excellent customer service, and this pandemic is no exception. We responded early by suspending shutoffs prior to the statewide order and quickly identified and restored service to customers who were previously disconnected due to delinquency. We modified our outreach message and intensified our efforts. We changed our 48-hour notices to bill reminders and started sending letters highlighting our various options for helping customers manage their bill. Additionally, we expanded our outreach to include bill reminders via email for those customers who have email addresses on file, and the contact center began an outbound call effort to talk with impacted customers and reassign staff to handle the increased CAP demand. Next slide. On the whole, the pandemic has not impacted the number of customers paying late, which is 60 days after their statement. The monthly average for 60-day delinquencies has not increased from the previous 3 years, as you can see from this table. The majority of our customers are paying their bill on time or making payment arrangements, and I will break that down by customer type. Next slide. The slight decreasing trend of 60-day delinquencies holds true for our single-family customers. For this group, the average number of payments received after 60 days has not increased during COVID. Overall, these customers are managing, as 98% are either paying their bill or making payment arrangements. Even more impressive during these challenging times, 94% of this customer group is responsive and paying for their water on time. Next slide. For our multifamily customers, the 60-day delinquency trend has slightly increased, and the majority are making payments on time. One benefit to the multifamily customers is that the district has a lien program in place to help maintain water service, regardless of bi-monthly bill payment behavior. Still, this customer group is also showing up with 95% of their payments on time and 98% paying or making payment arrangements. Next slide. We are seeing a shift in payment behavior of our non-residential customers. In this group, the average number of 60-day delinquencies has increased about 25% from previous years. Although 95% of our non-residential customers are paying their bill or making payment arrangements, 53% or over half of those that are impacted are in the service or hospitality industries, signaling us towards COVID. Next slide. Okay, so these last few slides have shown customer payment data associated with 60-day delinquencies. As we move on to this and the next few slides, we will share the impacts from COVID that we have seen on our delinquencies that are 100 days and older. The distinction here is that pre-pandemic and prior to the board's directive to find an alternative to shutoffs, this would be the point in the collection path where customers' water service would have been turned off due to non-payment. We are carefully monitoring and tracking this delinquency data, as these are the customers who will be impacted the most when the emergency is declared over. So our attention is called to them. Delinquencies greater than 100 days is where we are seeing the greatest impact of COVID on our customers. These two charts on this slide are illustrating this significant increase in 100-day or more delinquencies. These numbers have more than doubled since the start of the pandemic. Prior to 2020, the number of single-family residential customers reaching this level of delinquency averaged under 3,000 per month and under 300 per month for non-residential customers. In April and May of 2020, we saw a surge of new customers reaching this status, over 7,000 in April alone. It should be noted that before the district suspended shutoffs, service to most of the delinquent accounts was not interrupted. Less than 30% of single-family residential accounts and less than 25% of non-residential were actually disconnected, as the majority of them resolved their delinquency. Now, instead of a distinct group of accounts reaching this status each month, we have a rolling number of over 7,800 single-family customers and over 750 non-residential customers as of the end of the year. Next slide. The number of accounts and total arrear amounts for those delinquent for more than 100 days changes on a daily basis as payments come in and statements go out. These two charts show the rolling monthly average figures for accounts on the left, residential in green and non-residential in purple, and arrear amounts in right, residential in red and non-residential in blue. You can see that these rolling numbers continue to grow. It is more important than ever to get help to our customers through our customer service and assistance programs. When we started tracking this data last spring, the total arrear amount was at 5 million. And at the end of December, we are at nearly 9 million for all accounts. To get into the numbers and some additional facts, there are over 7,800 single-family residential accounts delinquent for more than 100 days as of the end of December. Over half of these accounts have reached this status for the very first time. Over 1,700 accounts have not paid at all since March 12, 2020. Nearly 1,400 have reached this status 10 or more times in the past, and 431 accounts have not paid at all since starting service. On the non-residential side, we have over 750 accounts delinquent for more than 100 days as of the end of December. Over 500 of these accounts have reached this status for the very first time, 75%. 159 accounts have not paid since March 12, 2020, and 16 have reached this status 10 or more times in the past. We continue to reach out to these customers on a regular basis to let them know that East Bay MUD has many programs and services designed to help our community and our individual customers with managing their water service. Next slide. To show a little more of what we know about the delinquent accounts, staff conducted a GIS analysis and learned that 55% of the delinquent single-family accounts are located inside disadvantaged communities. However, we know you can't really draw a line on financial hardship, so extending out 1/2 mile, this number increases all the way up to 84%. These two maps show our whole service area and illustrate the numbers of delinquent single-family accounts on the left before COVID and on the right as of December 2020, in both cases mostly along the 880 corridor. Next slide. For the takeaways, we are tracking delinquency data very carefully in the hopes to understand how the pandemic is affecting our customers. We want to understand to determine the best programs and methods to help them. The data is showing us that most of our customers continue to pay their water bill or are making payment arrangements. Delinquencies among multifamily customers are fairly consistent. Delinquencies among non-residential customers have increased significantly, and the number of single-family accounts delinquent 100 days or more has more than doubled and continues to grow. With excellent customer service at the forefront, the board resolved to implement an alternative to shutoffs designed to maintain water service for our customers at all times. And Alice Tui, Manager of Water Conservation, is next up to tell you about the implementation plan as well as the redesign of our multifaceted customer support program.
So we have a question from Director Young.
Hi, the question I have is regarding the back on slide 19, I think, where you show the amount that's in arrears. Does that include, is that the full water and wastewater bill? And does it for instance, for Oakland include the sewer service charge?
That's correct. It includes all of those charges, water, wastewater, and sewer service. And we have a rough estimate of about 2 million in sewer service charges attributing to these arrears.
Okay, so it's really 5 million for East Bay Mud. And are we obligated under our arrangement with Oakland? They only get paid if we get paid. Is that right?
That is correct.
Okay, so are they aware that there's $2 million in outstanding sewer service charges since the beginning of the pandemic, or not so much?
I would say not so much right now, but we are making the effort to inform them. One of the things that we want to clarify is that the $2 million is, it includes Berkeley, Emeryville, and other.
Okay, so everyone that's in the
Correct.
in the
So
agreement. Okay.
Yeah, it's hard to pinpoint exactly the number, because again, this is a rough estimate. And,
Right, most of it's Oakland though.
yeah,
Um,
that's good.
I would think. Okay,
Assessment.
all right, that's helpful. Thank you.
Mhm.
Okay, so on to Alice for our customer support program redesign. Thank you.
Thank you, Terry. Good morning, members of the board. My name is Alice Toohey. I'm the manager in customer service of our water conservation program. So I'm going to be talking today, as Andrew had alluded to earlier, about how we're redesigning our customer support program. And our vision for this is to really make the program more holistic. So it's not just about financial support, but we're really thinking about the customer as a whole person, really centering the customer. And as part of this update, I'm going to be talking a little bit about our efforts to ensure that we can keep the water on for all our residential customers. Next slide, please. So customers are at the center of everything we do here at East Bay MUD, and we've really tried to keep that in mind as we've thought about our customer support program. We want to make sure we design a program that's customer-centered. We want it to be proactive and responsive to our customers' needs. We want to be flexible and try to meet customers where they are. And we want to be guided by empathy. It's very important to us to really be aware of what our customers are going through and be able to offer services that help them. As always, with everything we do at East Bay MUD, we want our program to be innovative, and we want to make sure that we're thinking about equity in our program planning. And so you can see with these bubbles here that sort of surround the customer, these are some of the components of our customer support program that I'm going to be discussing today. Next slide, please. So obviously financial programs are important to helping our customers to keep the water on and to keep the organization afloat. You've heard an update already from Latrice and Terry about our customer assistance program. But what I really want to emphasize here is that that's just part of what we offer in terms of financial support. We do have payment plans and extensions that we offer to help our customers. That provides flexibility so that customers can keep making payments and on their schedule. We have our Water Lifeline program, which is a partnership with the Richmond Community Foundation and St. Vincent's of Alameda County, where employees have given pledges to provide funding for customers who have ended up in really dire situations, so emergency type situations. And I'm pleased to say that, you know, to date, over $26,000 in employee donations have come into this program, with just $6,000 in pledges for this fiscal year so far. And then a little bit later, Andrew is going to be talking about our attempts to negotiate sewer charge discounts for our customers as well. Next slide. So water use management, we know that one of the tools we can provide to our customers to help them keep their bill down is to help them manage their water use. Using less water means a lower bill. So there's a lot that our group in water conservation does already along these lines. We offer programs like leak alerts and home reports that can help our customers to see how much water they're using and know if they have a problem. We offer residential water audits. With the pandemic, we've been doing those virtually. We do phone consultations. We've also started piloting using tools like smartphones and Zoom to help have better interaction with customers. We offer rebates and free devices to help customers reduce their water use overall. And we have our innovative on-bill financing program that is particularly helpful for multifamily residential customers who want to make investments in water efficiency. We have identified some additional potential future initiatives that we're just starting to look into. I'll be giving a little bit more detail on those in 2 weeks as part of the long-term water supply workshop. But these would be programs that would be specifically targeted towards helping low-income customers to save water. Some of them involve partnerships, for example, partnering with PG&E's energy savings audit program, looking into some, and then also looking into some programs that would specifically relate to leak repair or toilet install of high efficiency toilets for these customers. And again, we will be talking about that a little bit more in 2 weeks. Next slide, please. So outreach and education, and this is just building on what Latrice was discussing earlier in terms of how we reach out to customers, because as we've been thinking about our program and particularly thinking more and more these days about equity, we really want to make sure that we are reaching all our customers throughout our service area. So that includes thinking about traditional program marketing, whether that's billboards, newspaper ads, bus ads, direct outreach through emails and letters, and then also non-traditional marketing, using social media, partnering with organizations like food banks and community partners who can help us to get the message out, using U.S. Postal Service's informed delivery service. We're also looking into some additional opportunities to expand our outreach, which could include updating our website, conducting some targeted webinars, further leveraging our community partners. And we've also started doing targeted outreach to homeless shelters, actually making calls to make sure that they renew their CAP applications or know about the program in the first place. Next slide, please. So as I've mentioned, I've sort of hinted at this across a few slides. Partnerships continue to be important for us. We think that this is a great way to reach more folks in the community and really leverage what other organizations are doing to expand our reach and our potential. So CAP outreach involves creating a community network. As I mentioned earlier, we partner with a couple local community groups for our Water Lifeline program, St. Vincent de Paul, and then recently in Contra Costa County, the Richmond Community Foundation. We are trying to coordinate with key stakeholders as we develop these programs, and particularly our efforts to keep the water flowing for our customers. And we are exploring some innovative public-private partnerships for some select water conservation projects, like that PG&E partnership that I mentioned that we're looking into. Next slide, please. And again, just, those are just a few of the sort of highlights of our customer support program. We do offer other types of support. Like I want to mention, we do offer lead testing to folks in the community who are concerned about their water quality in their homes. We have community support referrals to help customers get access to the support that they might need. We offer assistance with completing the CAP application, and new for this year, we are looking to put that CAP application online just to, again, make it easier for customers to access. Next slide, please. So we did talk about this a little bit a few minutes ago, but non-rate revenue is important for maintaining our CAP programs. Due to Prop 218, CAP has to be funded with non-rate revenue. Historically, that's meant telecom leases, long-term and short-term property leases. Currently, those provide about $4 million, which is enough for our current program size. But at our current, and I think later on, Andrew Lee will be getting back to you with an update on what our total non-rate revenue is. But we do anticipate that, as we continue to expand the program, we will need some new sources of revenue. And I've identified a few here that we're starting to look into, like a private lateral insurance program, a bill payment roundup where, if I'm paying my water bill and let's say it's, $15.89, I can just say, yeah, I'm just going to round that up to $16, and then that extra money will go into the pot for helping, disadvantaged customers. And those little bits of money can really add up over time. We're also looking at the potential to absorb unclaimed funds. And then, of course, we always look for grant funding for our programs, particularly in water conservation. We've had a lot of success in using grant funding to allow us to do some more innovative programs. And so that's something that we continue to track. Next slide, please. So now I'm happy to talk a little bit about a really important part of how we're re-envisioning our customer support program is this new emphasis on keeping the water flowing, having an alternative to shutoffs for our residential customers. And the goal of this policy is to really keep water on for all our residential customers. I think we've acknowledged that, when a customer gets into a situation where they're not able to pay their bill, they're already experiencing hardship, and we don't want to do anything that makes that hardship worse for them. As we've been thinking about this, there's a quote that I keep thinking of, and I'm sure Andrew and the others are sick of hearing this, but to quote writer James Baldwin, he said once, "Anyone who's ever struggled with poverty knows how extremely expensive it is to be poor." And so that's something we've been thinking in quite a bit about as we've redesigned our program, is just this idea that if customers are already experiencing hardship, we don't want to make it worse for them. So we really want to, our goal is to really maintain full water service for all our customers. But in those circumstances where customers do reach that 90-day, 100-day delinquency status, we would look for alternatives to shutoffs, in this case, putting in a flow restrictor. But again, that flow restrictor, and you'll hear me emphasize this multiple times, that really is our last resort. We want to maintain a conversation with that customer and make sure we have lots of options to help them avoid a flow restrictor. And if it does get involved, we want to just keep the conversation going and be working with that customer so we can get them back to full service, because that really is the goal. Next slide, please. So just a reminder that the board adopted the resolution on December 8th of last year, recognizing the human right to water. And the importance of water was really underscored by the current pandemic and the need for making sure folks are able to maintain sanitation, wash their hands, that kind of thing. We did identify at that time that water service termination disproportionately affects low-income customers in disadvantaged communities. And so the board directed staff to look for some progressive alternatives to address delinquencies rather than water service termination, but still make sure that we're ensuring compliance with Proposition 218. So we have started working on our implementation plan, and I'm happy to provide an update on that today. Next slide, please. And as part of developing this implementation plan, I want to emphasize that this is really a collaborative process, both inside and outside of the district. We've engaged key stakeholders, including nonprofits, community partners, policymakers, local city governments, associations, and other water utilities who might have experience with this technology. Next slide, please. So in terms of keeping the water on, I realize that this is a complicated slide, but I'll try to walk you through it, and I'll try to avoid just pointing at my screen since I know you can't see that. But this all starts, as Terry was mentioning earlier, when customers get to that sort of 90-day point, when they've already been delinquent for a few months. We continue to reach out to our customers and offer them lots of options to try to keep their water on. If they have medical certification, if they make payment, if they make arrangements with us, either like a payment extension or a payment plan, there would be no impact to those customers. If the customer isn't responsive, we would continue trying to reach out to them, and I'll talk a little bit more about our communication plan in a few slides. Now, if the customer is an owner, so if it's an owner-occupied single-family home, and the customer continues to not take action, they don't make payment, they don't work with us on a payment plan or extension, in spite of additional attempts to reach them, at that point, we would look at putting a lien on their property so that we could recoup those missing costs. And in that case, there would be no impact. If the customer is a renter, and again, we make multiple attempts to reach them, at that point, we would look at installing a flow restrictor. And so again, just to highlight, the key takeaway here is that we are offering numerous types of support to the customer at various points throughout this process. Next slide, please. So our implementation plan, there's a lot that goes into this, and we've made quite a bit of progress. We don't have all the details worked out, but we have begun to identify and work through a number of the issues that we need to address in order to implement this new program change. I'll be discussing some of these key topics today, including updates to our policies and procedures, our communication strategy, operational impacts, administration, and then financial impacts, both for EBMUD and for the customer. And as I mentioned, we're starting to think about our implementation plan and resolve all these issues, and also identify, what the resource impacts would be. Next slide. So a review of our policies and procedures is underway. We anticipate that making this change to keep the water flowing for all residential customers would require adoption of a new regulation and some updates to our existing policies and rates and charges. We also need to revise our administrative procedures so that we can incorporate this new step in the collection path. And throughout this process, we're going to be making sure, of course, that we are in compliance with existing laws, including the MUD Act, Proposition 26, and Prop 218. Next slide. So our communication strategy, and what you'll see me really emphasize here over the next couple slides is that, we are making multiple attempts to communicate with the customer, and we want this to be an ongoing conversation regardless of what happens. So if we do install a flow restrictor, that's not the end of that conversation. We do have a robust communication plan for our customers that may be delinquent to let them know about options and to try to help them maintain full water service. And we are working on updating our notification materials in order to discuss, the potential impacts associated with a flow restrictor, and again, really emphasize all the options available to customers to avoid the flow restrictor, and make sure that the customers are aware of our customer support program. And I'll be talking a little bit more about the steps in that communications process in a minute. But if the flow restrictor does become necessary, of course, we're going to let the customer know what to expect. But we also plan to provide post-installation and support and to continue to reach out to that customer so we can try to bring them back to the regular service. So, if you can think about it, we're trying to provide a lot of off-ramps for the customers so that we can, keep them at full water service. Next slide, please. So in terms of pre-installation notification and outreach, it's what we are envisioning is a very robust process with at least as much outreach as we've been doing in the past for shutoffs. This starts with the customer getting their bill. If they don't make payment after 60 days, the overdue process begins. There's a 15-day notice mailed, a 48-hour notice mailed. If we get to that point where it's been 93 days or more, at that point, we would attempt to leave a door hanger. We do recognize that those, I think sometimes there's been concerns and issues in the past with people not getting those. So we are going to be adding a step where we make one or more outbound call to, again, try to reach that customer. So we are looking at using multiple different communication methods here to really make sure that we're reaching that customer and giving them this information. And then if we do install a flow restrictor, at that point, we would return again with a notice with some additional information. So again, the key takeaway here is that the flow restrictor would only be used after we've exhausted all options to work with the customer to make payment arrangements.
Alice, this is Marguerite. Does the leaving a door hanger involve also knocking on the door and attempting to speak to the customer, or just leaving a door hanger?
That's a good question. I might ask Andrew or Latrice if they can speak to that in terms of field service.
Yeah, this is Latrice. We would still knock at the door to attempt to contact someone.
Okay, so I just think it's important. I mean, leaving a door hanger and actually trying to canvass somebody are two very different types of contact. And so if we're actually really trying to talk to someone when we knock on their door, then we should say that.
Okay.
And that leaving a door hanger is sort of like plan B if we can't talk to the person. So I think that we should really be saying we're actually trying to talk to people, unless we're not. And if we aren't, then we should, in my opinion.
Thank you.
With, armed with a CAP application and whatever is needed to rectify the situation, if they can, is what I would say.
Agreed. Thank you.
Okay. Yeah. Thank you.
If I
Yes.
might,
Go ahead, Frank.
a concern that I have about that, Marguerite, is that when we have somebody working alone, and that can be a potential interaction situation. So that would be something that we would want to have perhaps two persons going to the door if we're going to do that, because one person, they don't know what's behind the door.
So as somebody who was a door canvasser, who knocked on doors and supervised programs, knocking on doors and talking to people for over 15 years, those things certainly can happen, but I don't know. I would leave that to Latrice and others to figure out, but I don't think we should presume that there's a safety issue from somebody being in financial straits.
That's not what I intended to say.
Let me just add that safety is going to be one of our top concerns for our employees. So when we round up on the development program, we definitely will look at all facets of some of the safety issues, and we're going to take measures to ensure that our employees doing the work is safe.
Thank you. Are there other questions at this time? Okay, well, if we could advance to the next slide then. So post-installation support, again, even once the flow restrictor is installed, we're going to keep trying to reach out to that customer, sending them bi-monthly reminders, and we have a few different communication methods we could use for that. I just want to mention we are already sending out bill reminder emails to those customers who are in delinquency where we have email addresses. And we've found generally we have email addresses for about 50% of our customers. So we would also look at doing outbound calls, and then the mail, of course. So if the customer does make arrangements with us, our plan is to remove the device within 24 hours. But if the customer remains unresponsive, they would continue to receive reminders, but the device would remain in place until arrangements are made. Next slide, please. So operational considerations, and this is, I just want to really emphasize, this has been really a cross-departmental initiative to work on this. So in terms of operations, obviously, machining and maintaining an adequate inventory of the actual flow restrictor devices is something we'll need to work on. As I mentioned, our plan would be to install the flow restrictor within 5 days after exhausting all options, but then removal would be within 24 hours of the customer making arrangements. We do plan to provide written notifications to the customers to highlight potential impacts. So we want the customer to understand that there could be service level impacts, including things like reduced water pressure and flow, potential impacts on appliances, and we want to provide the customer with information on how to avoid any potential water quality concerns. And all that written notifications, of course, will also, reference our customer service phone number so that customers can get back in touch with us, because again, we want to keep that conversation going and provide options for them to get back to full service. Next slide, please. So program administration, we are looking at how we're going to have to sort of redesign our process in order to support additional outbound calls, in order to be able to work on having liens and collections. We are looking at updating our CIS collection path, which involves some updated programming. We recognize that components like enforcement and monitoring and tracking and reporting will be important parts of this process. So we have formed sort of an internal task force that's starting to meet and work on some of these issues. Excuse me. And we are, of course, in dialogue already with the unions that represent staff who might be involved in this effort. Next slide, please. So financial impacts, we recognize that this includes financial impacts on the customers as well as on the district. So in terms of impacts to the customers, we think that about 98% of the customers who would get a flow restrictor would have a meter that's 1 inch in size or smaller, which according to our current sort of payment schedule would be a cost of $127 to have that flow restrictor installed. But we do recognize that that could be a hardship for customers. I mean, if they're already having trouble paying their bill, we want to make sure that we're not sort of making things worse. So we are investigating some alternatives that could minimize that financial impact to customers, including we're investigating a zero installation cost option where the cost of installation would be funded by rate revenue, just sort of a part of the cost of doing business. So those are things that we're starting to look into in discussion, with finance. Next slide, please.
Actually, Alice, this is
Yes.
John Coleman. I have a quick question. We have to follow Prop 218 when looking at these items that you have listed here.
Yes.
And making sure that we're not getting ourselves caught in a bind where later we're perhaps setting a precedent under this that for other options for the district. I appreciate really the flexibility and the creativeness that you're looking at. One thing I'm going to ask, have we ever looked at, I know a number of agencies, not necessarily water agencies, but like regulatory agencies, which we are to some degree, generate funds through fines, and that they go to a dedicated account or fund. Have we ever looked at doing that, or do we even have the authority to do that based on whatever fines and where they come from? I mean, that's a legal issue, obviously.
Yeah, that's a good question. And I suspect that's something we're going to need to maybe look into and get back to you on. But Andrew, Lee, I don't know if you have any preliminary comments on that.
No, I think your answer is correct, that we probably have to look at it more carefully. We're definitely going to have to work with Craig and his team on looking at some of those options. But definitely we will be looking, into more detailed answer.
Okay, thank you.
Just following on John's question, I know in some of the reading that I've done, there is a concern, and I guess some water utilities actually use the fines and penalties that they charge delinquent customers to fund their customer assistance programs, which is a bit of a perverse, ironic. I mean, to me, that doesn't make any sense at all. So I'm assuming, John, that you're referring to other fines that might be levied. In other words, people that are stealing, contractors that are stealing water
Margaret, I agree. It would be very perverse to do it from the people who were trying to help. We had situations, I know, like with wastewater stuff being discharged into our wastewater system, but it's a different fund. It's water versus wastewater, where we relied on the regional water board to assess a fine. But do we have the ability to assess a fine? And then can we, and those fines then go into a dedicated account such as this to help pay for it?
Yeah, thank you. And thank you, Marguerite, for that clarifying question. So that's something that we will, look into and report back to the board on. If there are no other questions on this slide, I'll move to the next slide. So in terms of financial impact to the district, we want to be upfront that there are a lot of unknowns about this. We still don't know whether a flow restrictor is going to be as effective as a shutoff in terms of inducing payment. It could be less effective. It could be more effective if, again, it's helping customers to get back on their feet. We don't really know. Pre-COVID, our exposure for single-family residentials was between $2 and $3 million. Potential added exposure could be as high as 4 million or more, depending, how long the health emergency goes on and what happens with the economy after that. So that is something that we're going to be kind of tracking very closely. And if you'll advance to the next slide, we have started to think about some steps to minimize the district's financial exposure. So obviously, with the increased outreach and our customer support program, we want to make sure that we're providing options for our customers to help us make payments, even if they're not able to make, their full payment right away. We offer payment plans, extensions, just other ways to kind of, help them get back on track. In terms of minimizing impact overall, we are looking at, as I mentioned earlier, extending our lien authority so that we could collect from owner-occupied facilities, that tends to have about a 90% recovery rate. We are also evaluating the use of third-party collection for renter-occupied properties, which has about a 20% recovery rate. So we do have some tools available. And then I think some members of the board got an update from Marlene Dumaine earlier this morning. The district is continuing to monitor potential state and federal utility rate assistance that could help our customers, particularly during this time with COVID. So that's something that we're actively engaged on, to make sure that if there are funds available, we can get access to those for our customers.
Hey, Alice, we have a question from Director Young.
Yeah, so on the third-party collection for renter-occupied properties, I'm assuming that means debt collectors, which then, negatively impacts. I understand that these are for non-responsive customers. And that's what we're talking about, correct? We're talking about people that, despite our best efforts to reach out, et cetera, we end up putting them in collections and they end up with a flow restrictor and a black mark on their credit record, and let the collection agency try to continue. Do they continue accruing charges, or what happens?
And I might ask Andrew to speak to this. I think we're looking at this in cases where those customers close their account.
Okay.
So there will be Director Young, there will be an intermediate step that we're gonna put into the design. So that's part of the process that we include in the outbound call, that basically EBMUD now will step in the process to kind of act as the collection process. So for those accounts that close and leave a balance on the account, those are the one that goes to the collection agencies.
Is that different than what we do now?
It's not what it is not different. So
okay.
we basically, when someone, let's say a customer closed the account and did not pay the final bill, those are the one that goes to the collection agencies. And we're gonna
and that's what we've been doing, that's what we'll continue doing.
Correct. So we're not gonna put a black mark on someone's credit as long as they're an active customer on record.
Okay. And then question. So we have this, so people have this, say somebody that hasn't paid their bill since March, and we're able to reach them, and we say, hey, we understand we're not, trying to jam you to pay us now, but you've got a $2,500, water bill accrued over the last, or a $1,200 water bill, water and wastewater bill accrued over the last year. And do we then say, we try to get them, it's like, we'd like to get you started paying some of your water bill now, even before, help and see if there's a way that we can get you paying some of your water bill now, so that you're not continuing to accrue, this debt at that level. We can, we're waiving late fees, all of that. We want to get you into the customer assistance program if you can qualify for it, so that at least your ongoing bills. Can we put somebody into CAP in advance of them starting to pay something if they agree to go into it? So that's one question. And then if they're in CAP, then they're accruing the continued debt as long as they're paying something. Are we, how are we thinking about that? In the case of somebody who isn't prepared, I know we'll set up a payment plan for the arrears, right? But then on a going forward basis, while we're still in the pandemic, while this person may still be very financially stressed, et cetera, have we figured out what our, sort of minimum viable, arrangement is for somebody to be in CAP and pay something towards their, current debt that they may continue to accrue?
Yeah, that's a really good point. And really the word that we constantly we use and remind ourselves is we have to be flexible with customers who are in different situations. Obviously, there's no two customers going to have the same type of hardship. We want to be mindful of that. So we are working, the entire team is to work with customer to be flexible and making payments. As long as someone is in communication with the district and making minimum payment, and it could be, when we communicate with them, you can pay $10, you can pay $15 to just keep your bill down when you can afford it. It's more like a level payment approach. And some customers have been responsive. So for that, for those instances, as long as the customer is engaged with the district, their service is not going to be impacted. There's no negative impact.
Just one follow-up question. In the past, we've talked about monthly billing as one of the that are every 2 months bill. Itself poses a hardship, in part because people aren't used to paying it every single month, and so when it appears, they're like, is there? Are we also? And I know there's a lot of going to monthly meter reading is a big expense, but going to monthly billing is sort of less. Are we, sort of looking at how to enable, enable that as a way to help with this?
Absolutely. I mean, we definitely are looking at all options, and this is something that Sophia Skoda and I have ongoing, dialogues about how to make this an option. One of the things that we're talking about is that perhaps that, there's some opportunity to either provide an app for people who can use to make level payments. Like today I have some money that I want to just pay. They can set it up automatically. They can pay any amount they want, anytime they want towards the balance, so they can slowly, put it in a balance. Another thing, of course, for us to do really, accurate monthly billings, we have to have meter technology. And that the district has been working very actively and exploring kind of like the plan for AMI. I mean, that's going to be one of the things it's going to support the monthly billing approach. Because if we do a guesstimate at the end, we still have to make the bill whole. So we want to have good and solid information for the customer. So in the longer term, when we do have the AMI in place, that will be kind of solve that problem itself from a meter reading perspective. But we are looking at other options though to give as many alternative to customers to make their bill more affordable and more way to actually to pay it down.
Just to add to that, another thing we've been kind of looking at, and Andrew and I have been talking about, is like in water conservation, we have a rebate for these flow meters, which are these little devices that you stick on your meter, and it gives you by minute data on your water use. There is at least one vendor that we've talked to who does offer a program where they partner with utilities to make the devices available at a lower cost for low income customers. So we are looking into some of those types of programs as well, just to, again, get additional tools in people's hands. There's issues we need to explore there in terms of, contracting, and then also just, there could be some logistical issues associated with a program like that in terms of, people need to have Wi-Fi and that kind of thing. But we are definitely exploring some of those options. All right.
I have a question. I'm going to digress, but I hope it'll make some sense. The library periodically has a return your book and, no fines or whatever type of thing. What about a process that says, yeah, you've been behind and yeah, there's some penalties, but if you can make a full payment by a certain date and do that on a, maybe once a year basis or every other year basis, where somebody can say, okay, I can forget about all these penalties that are sitting there. I can get myself caught up and I'll be on a clean slate with the water company. Does that make any sense?
I think it currently we are doing that from a bill that has a late penalty related to COVID. Basically, if a customer has been, experiencing hardship because of COVID, we are already waiving those late fees. Are you speaking to more like in the, when we're back to normal?
I'm suggesting going forward. Yeah, because when it's to our advantage if people are current, and if we can give them an incentive periodically to catch up. I'm sure it won't be a whole lot that will do it, because if they were strapped to begin with, they're going to be strapped then too. But something that shows that we're trying to give them a chance to get square.
Excuse me.
And I think that does also offer an incentive in a sense, right? Like if we say to people, hey, if you make your payment on this particular day, we're going to waive the fee.
Yeah, that sort of idea.
Yeah.
And do it across the board with the customers, or have it as a policy of some kind. But I'm thinking you do that on a once a year basis, that might help people a lot. Not all of them, of course, but the idea is we want to throw out as many different kinds of life preservers as we can.
I think that's
Excuse me, President Lenny, we have one member from the public who wants to comment on this portion of the presentation.
sure we can take that. Frank, are you finished with, or Andrew finished answering Frank's questions or comments?
Yeah, I'm finished.
All right.
Okay, you ready? Okay, we have Juliet Christian Smith. You can unmute your phone now. And I also have Laura Feinstein. You're after Juliet Christian Smith. You will have 3 minutes.
Hi,
Starting
good
now.
morning. Good morning, board members. I'm Juliet Christian Smith. I am an East Bay MUD customer. I'm also a water professional. In my day job, work for the Water Foundation down the street from your offices, and worked for Pacific Institute before that as a water researcher. I am glad that there has been some outreach, and we have had a series of conversations with both the general manager and Mr. Lee about this program, and was able to get a lot more information about all the steps and off-ramps before getting to the flow restrictor itself. And we're very happy to see those laid out clearly, because I think that creates a precedent that can be applied in other places fairly and ethically versus just replacing shutoffs with flow restrictors, which is actually not part of the human right to water as defined by the United Nations. I think that this presentation today has raised a couple of questions for me, which is that you actually don't have full funding for a customer assistance program. And if I'm correct, based on the conversations that we've had, penetration rates of CAP hover between 10 to 21%. And that's a fairly low number compared to some other low-income assistance programs. It feels like we did have a conversation about having some kind of threshold for enrollment in CAP before measures like this would be taken. But now I do see the issue with that, which is that you don't have enough non-rate revenue to cover enrollment of all eligible customers, or those who simply cannot pay, no matter what kind of enforcement mechanisms you use to punish them. And so in that sense, I really wonder what you all are doing in terms of looking at non-rate revenues. If we're serious about helping customers during the worst global crises that this generation and others have faced during this pandemic, we know what's going on with the unemployment checks not getting out to people. Where will the non-rate revenue come from to actually help more families in trouble? What are your thoughts about that beyond private lateral insurance programs, which I don't know. I know the roundup on bills at SFPUC are not successful in covering anything like a $5 million gap. There are proposals in the legislature, obviously, for a low-income rate assistance program in this state. I don't know what East Bay MUD's take is on that, but it seems like you have a revenue problem if you're going to be serious about the off-ramps through customer assistance program. Thank you so much, and it's been a really wonderful working with your staff. Big shout outs to them, and interested in the board's take on this public policy issue that's in your purview.
Thank you. We have Laura Feinstein. I'm going to go ahead, and you should be able to unmute your phone. Your time is starting now.
Thank you very much. I'm Laura Feinstein. I'm the Sustainability and Resilience Policy Director with SPUR, the Bay Area Public Policy think tank. And I've been collaborating with Juliet and your great staff like Andrew, talking about how East Bay MUD can
knock it off.
how East Bay MUD can expand your customer assistance offerings, particularly in this really unusual time following this COVID pandemic. And I think that some of the points that Juliet raised are excellent. I mean, I think one of the big issues is that East Bay MUD has a lot of options for people who are unable to pay their bill and have accumulated these large debts during this recession period. But the big barrier is the fact that East Bay MUD, like many water utilities, doesn't know who most of its low-income customers are. So as Juliet was saying, according to your own estimates, East Bay MUD enrolls 10 to 21% of eligible low-income customers in the customer assistance program. which implies that there's 80 to 90% of low-income customers out there that East Bay MUD hasn't actively identified and enrolled in the customer assistance program. And East Bay MUD's work on estimating the percent enrollment did attempt to correct for the fact that low-income customers in multifamily buildings generally are not eligible for the assistance program. So that 10 to 21% of eligible customers is low-income people in single-family homes, or a best estimate. So we're really not reaching most people who need these assistance programs. And so many of them are not enrolled and then won't receive many of these offerings and assurances that they won't have their water disconnected, or I should say restricted, when the moratorium on shutoffs is lifted. So I think that really the big issue to solve is increasing enrollment in the customer assistance program, figuring out who the low-income customers are that deserve some of these access to some of these additional programs, and making sure that they get access to them. And you know, East Bay MUD is not alone in having low enrollment rates in their assistance programs. It's pretty standard across the public agencies in California. I will point to the private water agencies, which tend to have these higher enrollment rates, probably largely due to the fact that they're able legally to share data with the energy companies. So the energy companies have had a long-standing customer assistance program. They have about 84% penetration. They share data directly with the private water utilities, who do the best to database match and then auto-enroll low-income customers. And they tend to reach much higher penetration rates, about 50% or so. So it's really, it's important to recognize that first of all, there is an appetite out there for customer assistance programs. It's much greater than 10 to 21%. And B, that there are ways to get to higher levels of enrollment using things like data sharing. And so I know that this is going to require some creative thinking, but I think that some of the avenues to try to identify more low-income customers would be, first of all, to share publicity efforts on East Bay MUD's assistance program. So for example, when people sign up for CalFresh, or when they sign up for Medi-Cal, they should also be getting information on their local water assistance program and how to sign up. B, even better, there should actually be direct data sharing. So there should be MOUs between, for example, East Bay MUD and county assistance programs to share data directly, so that East Bay MUD could do database matching and auto-enroll eligible people as appropriate. And I think, as Juliet was saying, you know, if East Bay MUD set a target and said, we're only going to, for example, reinstitute flow restrictors once we've reached some critical threshold, let's say 50% of our eligible customers or 60% of our eligible customers are enrolled, then I think there would be a really tangible target for saying, okay, what does success look like for East Bay MUD and in identifying who its low-income customers are. And then I think some of the other big issues to touch on are, as always, you know, this whole issue of Proposition 218 prevents East Bay MUD and other public agencies from using ratepayer revenue to operate these customer assistance programs. And that's a longstanding problem that we should be thinking about how to correct. I think two things I would like to put out there are, one, an idea of running a pilot program to better understand the revenue impacts of offering bill discounts and some arrearage management programs. If it may emerge that a well-run, carefully targeted program for low-income customers might actually be revenue neutral for East Bay MUD. In essence, you know, there's one energy utility that did a study to this effect, where basically they found that when they enrolled low-income customers in a bill discount program, they recovered more revenue from those households than low-income customers that were not receiving the discount, because households were more likely to pay a bill that they could afford to pay in full, whereas they were more likely to pay nothing on a bill that they simply couldn't pay in full.
Ms. Feinstein, your 3 minutes have concluded.
Oh, I'm sorry. I wasn't looking closely at the clock. So, and that's all I really had to say. So thank you so much for your time, and I appreciate it.
Thank you. We have
Yeah,
one,
thank you for your comments.
thank you. We have one more public commenter, Edward Osan. You
Go
should
ahead,
be,
Ed, you have 3 minutes.
yes, and I will let, and you should be able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, and your 3 minutes are starting now. We have one more.
Yes, my name is Ed Osan. I work with the Natural Resources Defense Council. Many of my colleagues, as well as many of our members, are served by East Bay
You
MUD.
should be able to speak now.
Okay, can you hear me all right?
Yes, and your 3 minutes are starting now.
We're getting some feedback from somebody somewhere.
That's on somebody's, yeah, that's on somebody's phone. Hold on, let me see. Hit that.
Many of
Yeah. Mr. Osan, do you have two devices going? Are you listening to the live stream and also on a computer?
I'm on a computer.
And listening to the live stream on the website?
Feedback from somebody
Okay.
somewhere.
That's what, yeah, if you could mute that and then just keep your mic on. So mute your speaker and then keep your mic on. Okay. Don't mute your phone. I'll reset your time. Don't mute your phone, but if you mute your speakers. Listening to the live stream on the website.
Okay.
That's what, yeah, if you could mute that and then just keep your mic on. So mute your speaker and then keep your mic on.
Sorry.
Okay, can you hear us? Can you hear me?
I can hear you fine.
Okay, so I'm going to reset. Your time is starting now.
Okay.
Go ahead.
Yeah. As I mentioned, I'm Ed Osan with the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I'm wanted to register serious concerns about the flow restrictor.
So I'm going to reset. Your time is starting.
Edward, this is still very difficult to concentrate on what you're saying because we're hearing your time delay.
All right, let me work on this and maybe we could loop back in 5 or 10 minutes.
Yeah, let's try that.
Okay, thank you.
Andrew, we've got a few comments here. I see that there was, I think, 2 more slides on this particular section. But I would be interested to have you address some of the comments made by.
Let me work on this and maybe we could loop back.
Why don't we cover the last 2 slides and we can address some of the public comment.
That sounds good.
Okay, thank you. So if we could advance to the next slide. So just really quickly, as I mentioned, we are continuing as we develop this, this new program and this policy change, we are continuing to evaluate what the resource impacts would be. We've identified that we would want to reassign 2 full-time staff to administer the customer support program. And that would be to manage the additional notifications and follow-up, to provide that customer support communications before and after installation, to work on lean processing, and then the enforcement and monitoring aspect. There would be costs associated with the postage and outreach materials, and then costs associated with fabricating and maintaining an inventory of the devices. And we are continuing to evaluate what other resource impacts might be as we make this change, from shutoffs to the flow restrictor. Next slide, please. So just some key takeaways from this overall, kind of discussion of our customer support program is, again, we are really trying to focus on assisting the most impacted customers. We recognize the need to collaborate with our community partners to ensure success, to make sure that we're designing our program well, and then also during implementation to make sure that we're actually reaching customers. As I've said, the flow restrictor really is meant to be used as an option of last resort. I just want to clarify, we are not planning right now to use the flow restrictors during this emergency COVID period. So, while we're covered by the emergency order, at least we would continue to maintain full water service for our residential customers. And then we wouldn't be implementing until after the emergency order is lifted, at least, and until we've had a chance to really do extensive outreach into the community to make sure folks are aware of this change. So in terms of our implementation timeline, right now we're estimating that it could be, potentially we would make this change 6 months following the end of the emergency order. That would give us time to, again, do that outreach we need to do, and also continue to, develop our program materials and process. So that concludes my portion of the presentation. So I don't know if we now, Andrew Lee, if maybe you or I should maybe speak to some of these public comments, or do we have additional?
Alice, maybe we can see if Ed first has worked out his technical issues, and then I can take a first shot at responding to some of the comments.
Great, thank you.
Thank you. Mr. Osan, you should be able to unmute your phone now.
Okay.
Your 3 minutes are going to start now.
Okay, hopefully this will work without any further feedback. Does that sound all right?
Yes.
Yeah. Okay, terrific. Again, for the record, my name is Ed Osan. I work for NRDC, the Natural Resources Defense Council. And I wanted to register some serious concerns with regard to the use of flow restriction and what we know about East Bay MUD's plans for applying this approach for bill collection. As we understand it, the target flow would be 0.5 or 1/2 gallon per minute with the use of a device that would be made by East Bay MUD's own staff. We think it'll be very hard to actually hit that flow target throughout the service area, because flow through a fixed orifice is directly related to pressure, and pressure varies considerably across the East Bay MUD service area. So without knowing what pressure the flow rate of 0.5 gallons per minute will be designed for, it's sort of impossible to rely on there being 0.5 GPM at locations where this would be applied throughout the service area. And keep in mind that 0.5 GPM, if it is attained, has to cover both purposeful and non-purposeful consumption on the customer premises. In other words, all leakage would be subtracted from that 0.5, whether it's visible or unseen leakage. It's not clear how 0.5 was picked, but it appears it will certainly have an impact on showering and bathing. And that seems to be a pretty coercive approach to take for low-income customers. 0.5 gallon per minute also falls below the rated flow of shower mixing valves for scald protection. I'm not aware of any shower mixing valves on the market today that are rated to provide scald protection at 0.5 gallon per minute flow. So this is something that East Bay MUD should seriously consider. There's several other sort of unknowns or unsolved questions about this. One is the effect of flows at this ultra low rate on the operation of appliances. Will this void the warranties of a clothes washer? Will it impact the functionality of either a clothes washer or dishwasher? That should certainly be determined before East Bay MUD imposes this on any customers.
Mr. Rosan, your 3 minutes have concluded. Can you please wrap up your comments?
Sure.
Thank you.
The other effects that really require examination are whether this will increase the likelihood of cross connections and backflows, and what the effect of this would have on the aging of water within customer premises and the impact on potential water quality. So we think this is really, in its present form, is an unwise policy and requires further examination.
Thank you, Mr. Osan. If you have further things you weren't able to cover here, please put them in a letter and send them in.
Will do.
Thank you.
So let me try to address some of the comments. First, I want to say that really appreciate working with Julia and Laura and having the conversations about the program. And we agree in our discussions that the priority really needs to be focused on how do we increase the CAP participation. We've had discussions about the benefits, the pros and cons of auto enrollment, certainly partnering with other agencies to get data to improve our CAP enrollment. And this is, again, something that the board has discussed to do a lot of the target outreach and look for more creative ways to increase that participation. As far as funding goes, I think there's two areas that we're looking at. The first is what do we do as far as the COVID funding from the federal relief to help our customers? And then the longer term issue of how do we make sure that we have a sustainable funding supply post-COVID? And that was a question that Director Young had asked very early on. Andrew talked about the leases, and we'll respond back with all of our non-rate revenues and how we can ensure that we have a long-term sustainable plan if we reach that target of 33,000 customers or whatever that number may be. And then other things that Laura had talked about, she highlighted some issues that she wrote in her report, in her SPUR report. And I think there's some interesting things that they put in the report that we're going to look into with respect to arrearages and overall revenue, whether or not you put a customer on the CAP program or not. With respect to Ed Osan's comments, we want to outline what you heard from Alice and from Andrew as a really very thoughtful process that, when you get to that point only after much outreach and really with the customer not being responsive. We looked at other agencies. We looked at other agencies outside the country. When you look at that 0.5 GPM, we know that the pressure varies throughout our service area. And we're targeting the size of this orifice to really kind of be the around the baseline of what a customer will be in the lower pressure range. So certainly somebody with higher pressure would see higher flows than the 0.5 GPM. We also recognize that this is an alternative to shutoffs. If we go back to our post-COVID practices, these customers who are completely unresponsive to East Bay MUD would have their water shut off completely versus providing some flow. But as Alice highlighted, we do recognize that there's some issues that the customer, even when you have some flow, there could be issues with your appliances, and even some very remote but potential water quality issues. And that's part of the information that Alice talked about that we're going to share with the customer, so that before we do any of this, we're going to provide that information to customers so they're aware. But again, as a reminder, what we're trying to do is, if we don't do anything right now, the alternative is to go back to our normal practice, which is we would shut off the customer. We do know from other agencies outside in Australia where they've done this is it's as effective to get the customer to be responsive to the agency as shutoffs. So we're trying to find that very narrow path of narrow group of customers who don't respond. But what you saw in the flow chart that Alice talked about is the vast majority of the customers will see no impact whatsoever. But there is a group of customers that, despite all of our efforts, do not reach out, do not speak with us, and we have to send some sort of signal for them to start working with us. Andrew, would you like to add to that, or Alice?
I think you covered it really well, Clifford. I have nothing to add.
Yeah, no, I think you covered it, Clifford. I do want to again just thank those folks for their comments, and it gives us more to think about as we develop this program. So are there additional questions or comments on this portion? If not, I can hand things over to Andrew.
Director Young has a comment.
You have your hand up. You're mute.
A quick thought about the who are the unresponsive customers. That's a little bit of a hard, I think, sort of a hard question to ask. But part of what I'm wondering is whether we know anything about other barriers to communication that might be impacting that unresponsive group. And that's part of why I asked about the door knocking and trying to talk to people. Is also the language issue, and how are we attempting to understand or communicate with people in a language that they speak where they may not. I mean, I know the color red usually signals like warning, and I know that we put that on our bills and communications when things are urgent, but just how we're, reaching out in the languages that our customers speak around the district, which are numerous. I think it's probably back when we had to produce the water quality report in many languages. I think it was 9 or 10 for the district that crossed the threshold. So.
Yeah, I think that's a really good question about understanding what the barriers are. What we do know, looking at the data, pre-COVID, when we did shutoffs, you saw in one of the graphs that, of the percentage of the customers who reached shutoff status, we actually only shut off about a quarter to maybe 30% of those customers. And what we do know is when they get that notice, within one day, 80% of the customers contact us. And within 2 weeks, I think it's upwards to 95% of the customers will contact us. So we'll look at this data more. I think that's a really good question for us to look into. But what we do know is there is a group of customers that, with the signal of shutting off and now looking at whether flow restrictions will be as effective, they do respond to us. The majority of respond to us within a very short period of time. But that's an excellent question that we'll look into.
And just to add to that, you raise a really good point as well, Director Young, about the issue of languages. I think the plan is to translate these materials into at least a few other languages. But as you point out, there are a lot of languages spoken in the Bay Area. So that's something I think we're going to continue to kind of think about as we design this program and design our outreach.
Clifford, I was wondering if I could get maybe just a little more clarification too on how we measure our success. We spent a lot of time talking about the shutoffs, and that was certainly what brought this to our attention in the first place. But is the number of eligible customers that we've actually signed up a measure of success? Are we shooting for a certain percentage of those eligible as an ultimate measure of our success, or is it a decline in shutoffs? Or can you address that? Some that was brought up by one of our speakers.
Yeah, I think that's a good question of what the trigger would be. I mean, Andrew and the team and I have talked about what's a good trigger for us to really look at what our CAP eligibility thresholds are. I mean, as an example. And I think, the speaker brought up as, maybe 50% might be the threshold. And I think this is something that we need to look at is, what are those thresholds in terms of, how we implement parts of the program. So it's a discussion we're having. There's no number I can kind of pinpoint, or is the CAP participation the right number? I think the other thing, again, the data is imperfect, and we've been looking at the data across the state. And if you look at the number of delinquencies, which Andrew shared with you, which is around 7,800, and you look at the number of CAP participants, which is, around that same amount, actually slightly more, that's vastly different than what we're seeing in other water agencies. Other water agencies see far more delinquencies than their CAP participants, in the data that we've seen. We know that's not a perfect way of looking at it. And so I think there are other ways that we have to look at the data to make sure we're picking those right triggers. So I don't want to give you an answer right now. I'm trying to dance around this because it's a conversation we're having. It's something in terms of we're looking at the data, but of the things that we're looking at, I think we're going in the right direction. It's not perfect yet, and I think some of the ideas that both Julia and Laura brought are great suggestions that we're going to look into.
Great, thank you. And I want to make special thanks too to our speakers for both participating on an ongoing basis with us and coming to today's meeting to address the board. And any other questions from the board before we get on to the next part of this discussion? All right, go ahead.
If not, I'll thank you everyone for your time. I'll pass it over to Andrew Lee, who's going to talk about our work with the cities on reducing their sewer collection charges, and then our work on issues involving homelessness.
So I guess this is a good check-in point with the board. If you need a quick 5-minute break, we have about another 18 slides to go, so I can make it quick. And then I know we are wrapping up by 11 o'clock. So do you want me to continue or?
Yeah, I think we're doing fine. Let's
Okay.
hear it from anyone, any shout. Okay.
Okay, great. So just as a reminder, the district provides building services for Oakland, Berkeley, and Emmett for their sewer collection charges. And obviously there's some administrative and other cost benefit for this current arrangement, such as cutting down postage costs as well as reduced paper waste. But as you know, I mean, we have seen that this pass-through charges have become a pretty significant part of the overall water bill for our CAP customers. So to lessen the impact for our customers related to that pass-through charge, we have been engaged in multiple discussions with the city since 2018 to work with the cities to implement a cap for their sewer charges. So while some progress has been made, we're definitely not at the finish line. And with the agreements expiring in 2023, we are at a decision point to decide on whether we're going to either renew those agreements or we won't. So I have made several attempts to get connected with the city of Emmett, and so far that effort has been not very good. Haven't received any responses from the city regarding this effort, whether we're going to continue discussions or not. For Berkeley, we are having ongoing discussions with the city, and in all those discussions, city staff have expressed support for a full 35% discount. However, they are under some hardships because of COVID, and they will be discussing this sewer cap with their city council members at a later meeting to kind of gauge support and to get further direction from the city rather to add this item to their FY22 budget or not. So as far as I know, we will be invited to participate in this discussion. So once I learn more, I will report back to the board on that. So on December 15th, the city of Oakland, their city council voted in support of a phase-in discount. And during the meeting, the city council president did encourage staff from both agencies to work together to make sure that this count can be carried out in future years. And it was great to get their support for this very important effort because it has been a long time. And since then, we have been working with city staff to develop an addendum to the original agreement to allow us to implement the discount on their behalf. So the table here on the top, you see that it kind of captures what the phase-in discount would look like for the city of Oakland. They are committed to, at least verbally right now, to begin the program at a 10% discount rate as the baseline going forward. And I'll explain what the word baseline means. So of course, based on the number of conversations I have with the city of Oakland, they are still committed to reach a 35% goal by fiscal year 24, and that goal it's not changing. But because of the fiscal challenges due to COVID, they will not, however, guarantee if there will be some sufficient funding to fully fund the 21% or the 28% or the 28% before we get to the 35%. In the year FY24. So based on that, we had a number of conversations. Originally, they wanted to include an off-ramp in the addendum, basically meaning that they can walk away from that arrangement anytime if the city council do not authorize additional funding for it. But that has changed. One commitment the city of Oakland has made is that once the discount is implemented, they will not take it away. And they will not lower any percentages of the discount that's in effect. So let's say that if they were able to bring the discount up to 21%, they will not go back, reduce it back to 10%, and they will keep pushing it forward to make the percentage higher for the total percent discount until they reach the 35% by 2024. So why is getting the city to adopt a cap on their charges so important for our customers? It is because, I mean, the pass-through charges, as you can see on this sample bill here, is significant, especially for our cap households. And as you see in this sample bill to your right, our Oakland cap customers with an average water use has a pass-through charges that is actually higher than all of East Bay MUD's charges combined. And you look at the numbers, it's $76 compared to $84, which that's kind of the flat charges from the city of Oakland on their sewer collection charges. So while having, of course, the city to implement cap is a good option to lower the overall water bill. Of course, another option that's always on the table that the board can consider is to remove this arrangement and remove the entire $84.06 from this bill. Now, that means that there will be a $2.3 million loss in revenue for the district, and that would have about 0.3% rate impact overall. And you heard that from the initial budget workshop as Sophia Skoda explained what the impact would be overall. So based on the feedback from our initial budget workshop, the intent is to schedule some meetings between the elected officials between the district and the cities. And depending on the results of these meetings, we will follow up with a formal signal to encourage the city to make a decision or to allow them the option to take their fee for, and get it billed through the property tax bill. We are ready. Our team is, ready and standby to support any effort to, implement the cap on the city sewer charges. But we're also ready to help the city transition to the property tax as well, if that's the decision they are ready to make. So overall, we're ready to support this effort.
Director McIntosh has a question, Andrew.
Yes.
Yes. Hi, Andrew. Can a delinquent East Bay MUD customer enroll in the CAP program? Can they pay their delinquent East Bay MUD charges and not pay the city sewer charges?
Unfortunately, the way that I understand it is they cannot. When we receive a bill, we have to proportionally distribute it. So basically the money that we receive, we cannot just say that we take that and apply it only for East Bay MUD's charges. We have to split that and we have to pay proportionally to the city's charges as well.
Is that something that could be possible in the future?
I think this is something definitely we can look into as we renegotiate a new contract. If we decided to negotiate a new contract, we have to leave basically all options on the table. But if we are to make the decision to continue with that agreement, we should be negotiating starting in about a year. So we will be happy.
So it could be possible during our negotiations.
I think it's possible. I mean, anything is possible. We can look at that item for discussion.
Okay. Thank you.
And Director Young, I see that your hand is up. You're on mute.
You on mute,
The sewer charges, the sewer charges are, they've been around for a long time, but they've increased dramatically over the last few years as a result of the consent decree, right? Eileen, if you're in the audience, I think that's, or Clifford, I think that's right. I believe that's correct, which means that they're really charges that are intended to upgrade the long-term infrastructure of the sewer collection system to address, the I&I issues, et cetera, which makes me think that they're more about infrastructure than they are about ongoing. They're not really sewer service charges. They're really sewer infrastructure charges, which, I mean, as I think more and more about this, you know, especially for our low income customers who are not, you know, potentially long term in their, you know, households or in Oakland, they're not getting a. It's just making me think about whether from a policy perspective we should have this on our bill, not just from a courtesy perspective. But you know, is it right that folks who are paying for water on a monthly basis, and granted, they are paying for their share of the infrastructure of the water system to provide that, and their share of the wastewater system to treat the wastewater. You know, but I wonder whether, you know, from an equity perspective, whether, you know, because Oakland and these other cities underinvested in their infrastructure for sewer, for their sewers, whether, you know, our ratepayers, they're, you know, whether people should be paying today for the mistakes of yesterday, basically, in the way that the collection, the way the charges are handled. So it's a long way around of thinking that I'm actually feeling more like it shouldn't be on our bill from a policy perspective, potentially, even if you know, if they aren't willing to do, yeah, I don't know. I'm very mixed about this because of the huge impact it has on our bill, because we can't do as Lisa suggested, and you know, and the large share of the you know, arrearage that we have that's due to that. So yeah. Anyway, that's more of a comment than a question, I think.
Thank you, Director Young. And Eileen's on the line. Just maybe she can quickly respond to the question about the increase in the sewer charges.
Yeah, and you are correct, Director Young. The increase in sewer charges are related to addressing our aging infrastructure. And we do need to, you know, be mindful of the fact that we are in a consent decree with Oakland, Berkeley, Emeryville, and we are trying to work collaboratively with them all to address the I&I so that we're not left holding the bag and potentially have to, you know, build large storage. So we've been working with them, and as an outcome of recent discussions, even with EPA and the regional board, we're going to probably be spending more money on flow monitoring and identifying I&I. So it won't be surprising that sewer charges will be probably increasing in order to address the aging infrastructure. And we, you know, Berkeley, Emeryville, and Oakland are not unique. You've seen SFPUC has had significant sewer charge increases over the last many years, and other wastewater utilities. But you are correct. It is because of the aging infrastructure issue. And now the regulations have gotten much more stringent. With climate change, we have to be more mindful of I&I.
Yeah, I guess what I'm wondering is whether it's appropriate for that to be on the monthly bill. And if we have looked at whether other sewer collection charges are usually on the property tax bill, or they're usually on, you know, are we unique in offering this courtesy to, you know, the cities? And, you know, maybe there's also, in thinking about it, a way to bifurcate, and I have no idea whether there's legal issues associated with this, but bifurcate the charges so that the portion that's dedicated to long-term infrastructure goes to property taxes, and the part that's related to ongoing O&M goes on the bill. So that as another way to address, it. And then there's, you know, sort of also the issue of how close in proximity you are to the interceptors, in terms of what share of the charge you should bear as a resident. So if you live in the hills, you're really far away from the interceptor. If you live in the flatlands, you know, it's down the street, basically.
Well, I want to be mindful of our time. We have about 10 minutes to close session. Andy?
Yeah, I wanted to also join Marguerite in just taking a critical eye to the sewer charges that are on our bill. I do think that they have an appropriate role on the bill, though it's fairly debatable. I think Eileen provides a pretty good example of how an amortized capital program does have a benefit to customers, and the amortization of that charge is a way of getting to the fair share that someone who is still benefiting at a moment in time is able to benefit and pay for a proportionate amount over time. But there are issues with it, and we've identified this one important issue of the lack of an affordability discount, and we're insisting on that. I strongly support our efforts to insist on that, and I'm working with the two cities that are completely within my ward regarding that. But there is another issue that does not affect the two cities in my ward, but affects Oakland, that I think does present a real issue even after we deal with this affordability discount. And that is the fixed nature of the charge in Oakland. It is a fixed charge, and that adds a very significant, unavoidable charge that dampens the incentive to conserve. So as we're reaching this deadline, it may be too short notice to the city of Oakland, to our renewal, but it might be something that we want to put on the horizon for the next renewal after that, or to have a short-term renewal, anticipating that we would like reform. It's not in scope, for this workshop right now to get into enough detail, but I do think that this fixed charge for Oakland residents that does create some problems for the customer experience in light of our encouragement for conservation.
All right, thank you. Andrew, could you put a little finer point on what the timeline is on the renewal of this contract? Have we got a year, or we got how much time?
So the contract expires on June 30th, 2023. So that means that we have to really, I would say, going backwards from that point, we should be starting negotiating about a year from that point on. So a year from now, we should be negotiating and getting the language together. So sounds like a long time, but in reality, there's not a whole lot of time when we're talking about a complicated agreement like this.
All right, thank you.
Okay, so I'm gonna just try to move this thing along pretty fast, and feel free to stop me because I know you guys have to go to closed session in a few minutes. So as Clifford pointed out earlier, that homelessness has been a growing challenge in the Bay Area, and we all see it every day when we go driving on the street. And as a provider of a essential service, we want to continue to do our part to be good neighbors and make a positive impact on the community that we serve. So last year, late last year, we were approached by a group of advocates requesting the district's permission to bring water from a customer's property to the homeless encampment. And this particular request came because many of our customers want to do the right thing, but also they were concerned about getting into trouble with bringing water across the property line. So, why are we talking about this? Because it sounds pretty simple. The district's regulations actually, the language, the way that it says it prohibits the resale of water. And based on that language alone, it could be easily interpreted as that you cannot take a gallon of water across the property line and give it to someone. But being in the new business office for a while, I can tell you what the intent of this rule is. And the intent is that it's really prevent illegal connections between properties, where you have 1 meter from, let's say, from my home, and I decided to take the service from my home and create my own little network and serving multiple houses behind, in different properties. So the regulation also have a provision in there that says that special approval can be considered in unique circumstances. And we consider that providing water from one household to help in an encampment, someone's in a very difficult situation, is a unique circumstance. So to allow this type of temporary arrangement to bring water from a private property to the encampment, we are developing a framework to allow Good Samaritan to share their water with the homeless community. So ultimately, we want to put a process together to allow customers who want to do the right thing to help the community members without really worrying about being questioned by the district a day in violation of the regulation or not. But at the same time, we also want to be mindful that we don't want to create a framework that really now allow customers to take the water and start creating their own little network behind their property. So that's the balancing act that we have to make, and we are putting the language together and should be rolling that out shortly. So another form of support the advocacy group is asking the district to explore is using the hydrant meter to provide temporary water service to encampments. Obviously, this alternative is a little bit more complicated and a whole lot more involved. First, the district must update our regulation to include provisions in the regulations to allow for domestic use to the hydrant. Currently, our hydrant meter program is designed for only for the allow of construction water use. So for someone to take that water and perhaps dust control, water plants, that sort. We are working with the OGC to explore if a section can be inserted in there to support special circumstances like homeless encampments. There are public health and safety concerns, as I highlighted here, because we also want to make sure that we don't want to solve a problem by introducing a problem. There are also operational and device requirements that we have to look at. The device obviously is going to be a special and unique device that has to be customly outfitted, so that is not impacting fire truck who have to access that location to put out a emergency fire, for example. Additionally, we do have to coordinate with local jurisdictions like the health department and the city to make sure that what option that we've decided to do does align with their guideline in terms of is it a sanctioned location or not, or is it something that's going to create a public safety concern if we are going to provide water there. So finally, we are going to explore some type of pilot and see how that can develop to support this need. And for specific site that is sanctioned by a local jurisdiction. So you have heard this from the SAC workshop a few weeks ago. And on the development front, the district has been very active and has extended the pilot program to help evaluate water demand for micro unit designed to house the homeless. We are currently working with 2 developers on finalizing agreements to kind of do the pilot for these 2 projects. And currently we are moving along. So hopefully we can have those agreements in place soon so we can start really understanding how water use is being recorded at this type of development sites. And because of the recent impact due to COVID and the urgency to keep our members of the community housed, we did work with Oakland to accelerate a couple of water service applications to bring water to some emergency shelters, and we got those done in record time. So kudos to staff for doing that quickly. So the district is actually working on arrangements with 2 nonprofits for the use of hydrant meters right now to help fill mobile bus showers to support the need for hydrant at those encampments. We are also working with this nonprofits on accepting and treating any wastewater that can come out of those shower buses as well. And another thing that I want to share with the board that we are also working with homeless shelters and extend CAP to those nonprofits. As you heard from Alice's presentation earlier, that we are making outbound calls to get in touch with those agencies, and we want to bring them on CAP because obviously they do provide a benefit for the community. The district continue to partner with Berkeley and a local church in Castro Valley by bringing temporary water services to some navigation facility to help support homeless families and transitioning back to a house environment. I am happy to report back to the board that we are near finalizing a permanent water service for the Berkeley facility. So we are expecting 2021 to be a very busy year for the district, as you know, and our goal obviously is going to be, intensify our marketing outreach and really try to reach the customers who are, qualify for CAP but not on CAP, and increase enrollment over time. So in our Sacramento office, staff is monitoring very closely all the funding activities related to low-income rate assistance, and they have very active in engaging in many discussions at both the federal and state level. Our goal is to have any type of rate assistance related to utilities to be extended to our customers as well, but in a fair and proportional way, because we feel that our customers need the help just like all other Californians, and they need the same access to those programs. Lastly, we are coordinating with cities and counties on the rental assistance relief funding program that is intended to help with utility arrearages. Because not everyone knows about those programs and availability on those programs. So we want to make sure that our partner agencies as well as customers have all the information they need to get access to help that they need to pay their utility bills. So for 2021, our number one priority, as I mentioned, is to continue to be responsive to the customers who are impacted by COVID, really being there for them and not let having access to water be another stress point in their life. We will continue to focus on increasing CAP participation through targeted outreach, and we will accomplish that goal by working closely with our PAO staff to develop a comprehensive marketing campaign to promote the program, using both traditional and non-traditional media channels to build a wide community network to really get the word out. Because it doesn't matter how good your program is, if people don't know about it, then it's not a very effective program. So our goal is to make sure everyone in our service area know about our CAP program as well as the other support programs we have out there to support them. Something that we're planning to do this year, obviously, is like what one of the public speaker mentioned, is that we want to collaborate with agencies such like Housing Authority to share data to really help identify eligible customers in advance and look for a way to really effectively reach them and bring them onto the program. This is something that we've been thinking about and will be actually start doing in the next in this year, and I'm hoping that we will have good results coming back with the board next year, and we will give you an update on that effort going forward. So to streamline the CAP application, another thing that we're going to be doing in 2021 is that we are going to have an online application for our CAP applicants to give them a tool to get their applications done quicker, so we can get the approval done faster, so they can receive the benefit faster as well. We will be looking at hosting some workshop to help customers who are having difficulty with the application process and kind of walk them through it and get them on the program quickly. And of course, we want to continue to advance our effort with both Oakland, Berkeley, and Emerville to advance their sewer program as well. And another effort we're going to do internally is to grow the Water Lifeline program to make sure the fund is available there to help those families that are in need. We will continue to advocate at the state and federal level to make sure that any type of rate assistance benefits are being extended to East Bay MUD customers. We want our fair share for our customers who are impacted. And of course, we know the non-rate revenue for the fund cap is not unlimited. So we want to know how we can stretch that dollar, and we can look at different ways to make sure CAP customer, either through a eligibility threshold, to see how we can stretch that dollar going forward. And this is something that we're going to be looking at actively in the next 12 months. So in summary, in addition to our goal, to grow CAP in the next 12 months, we will work on finalizing the implementation plan for the alternative to shut off. We will complete the redesign of our customer support program and see how everything fits in there to give customers all the tools they need to keep water service on. And to address this issue of homelessness, we will be a partner in the process, we will work from a water perspective and as a community, work with community partners to address this real issue out there. And of course, for the program to be successful well into the future, we need resources. And we will look for ways to identify and secure non-rate revenue to make sure we have a sustainable funding source going forward. Now, there are some ideas we're going to bring to the future Finance Committee meeting, and we're going to share those ideas with the board. And we do have a good plan going forward, and you will hear more about it in the future. And that concludes the presentation. And sorry, I went through this kind of quick. If you have any questions, if you need any detailed information on the slides that I went through, feel free to ask questions and discussions at this point.
Great, thank you, Andrew. I just want to note that we're 8 minutes over, but if there are comments or questions for board members, now's a good time for that. Andrew? I'm Andy.
Yeah, I'll keep some of these comments brief. I hadn't made comments throughout the slideshow. I wanted to just question, I'm unclear on the rationale for a PSL insurance. So I could be open to an actual discussion about what it is, because we didn't get a good definition of it, but it does seem to be disconnected from the purpose. I wouldn't want to be profiting off of something that customers are putting down in an insurance format and then redistributing it a different way. That there's a transparency problem that I'm unclear about, but I might be missing something because we didn't have a chance to actually hear about what it is. I do think it's a wonderful idea to support a customer roundup for additional revenue for CAP. That sounds like an excellent short-term fix. And in the long term, I think that we should be thinking about opportunities to ask voters for additional property taxes. It's a more difficult mechanism because we do have to go to the voters, but I think it should be an option on the table depending on our needs. So I do have concerned, moving on to a different issue. I do support the cost of rolling the cost of the installation of a flow restrictor to the general rate base. This is not a particular service that only benefits the restricted customers. It's a collection program that benefits all customers. So it's reasonable for all customers to pay the charges of the flow restrictor because we are collecting for the whole district. And there's affordability problems with imposing that charge on the delinquent charges. So I would support that effort that staff indicated. I have some concerns about customers accruing large bills while the flow restrictor is installed. So I would like to find a way to comply with Prop 218 and to consider suspending or reducing the fixed charge while customers are receiving restricted service. That seems to be an affordability issue that will be new because customers who were in arrears were able to not have to pay anything while they weren't getting service. And I think we are setting ourselves up for a situation where people will be accruing much larger accrued bills by the time they're able to begin attempting a repayment plan. So I'd like some consideration about that issue. I'd also like to see a memo responding to the concerns raised by NRDC about the mechanics of the flow restrictor. I'm hopeful that we will be able to work out safety considerations, but hearing a concern about scald protection and water quality issues related to backflow, I think that's worthy of having some study and a report back to the board. And I'm hopeful that we will find that this is safe and won't pose a health and safety risk. I do think we could deal with appliances with appropriate warnings, but scald risk or water quality, I think that rises to a more serious level. So I also would like to thank staff for working with the city of Oakland to drop their off-ramp they were considering. It sounds like we're making really, really good progress. Those are my compressed comments. Thanks.
All right, thanks, Andy. Anyone else have any comments? Bill.
I want to make sure I get my mic unplugged.
We hear you.
I think a lot of good things came out of today's session, and there certainly are things for us to continue to look at as we go forward into it. I was particularly enthralled by some of the comments having to do with the water maintenance in Oakland, particularly in the sewers and in that cost that it appears on the bill. I don't know how much experience folk have had, but I worked with the underground system when I was in the city of Oakland. And it's true that that infrastructure is aged, but it's been repeatedly worked on. I think Oakland's growth pattern at one time increased. And so you're not just talking about the flatlands when you talk about sewers and people in that area. Our sewer system reaches all the way up into the hills. Everything is coming down to the flatland from the hills. So you have density in Oakland, and that density has now moved upward into the hills. And all of those systems had to be redesigned. That's why you see so much of the streets torn up in Oakland as they go down to do that work. Most of those arterials that come down, and they start out at Keller and come all the way across Redwood, all the way down through the arterials, Park Boulevard being on the other end, all the way back and across MacArthur, and even down to East 14th or International Boulevard. There's a network there. And I kind of got involved around Lake Merritt, where they had particular problems way back when Piedmont crossed their lines, and you had that flow going into Lake Merritt. I guess historically, I'm looking at the pattern that Oakland has to contend with. And yeah, they have a capacity to lower at some point, because these things have to get done, and there's a lot of money that has to be poured into it. So it's just not maintaining the existing, it's also rebuilding and rehabilitating. I just wanted to throw that on the table because I've had some unique experiences, even up to the Oakland Zoo. And those are all things that are part of our staff studying and getting closer to them on those issues and making sure that they're addressed. I do want to say that the water infrastructure, which we are involved in and are improving on all the time, do create some problems as well. But we have more ratepayers coming in, and we may want to examine as we go forth. We're getting ready to talk about cutting the rates going forward for water. With all the things I've heard today, particularly from the state's inability to help us, we may have to reconsider our financial end as it relates to this, to make sure that we have enough resources to pay our way for all these persons, even the small percentage that don't pay the water bill. That's really got to be addressed, and not by those who are paying their water bill, because we have many customers who have never been behind. And we have many customers coming back in as a result of the staff input. I just wanted to make those comments because I've been reading all this material. I've had a lot of time to sit and to analyze and also to have a historic perspective as it relates to Oakland in particular. So I throw those on board to say, let's take a closer look at it. It is going to be more costly, but things are going to get better. And I think as the economy improves and whatnot, we'll still be able to stay in the 90 percentile and even go further without having to burden people who pay regularly with those who don't, and making that comparison isn't really good. I think the things that have been brought on board by outside agencies and foundations and whatnot willing to help with this, these are all marvelous things that staff is putting before us, and I hope we take a hard look at it. Those are my comments.
All right, thank you, Bill. Any other board members? I see Frank shaking his head. John, no. Marguerite? No, okay. So thank you. I just wanted to make a couple comments. One is that I like at the beginning, the staff talked about a holistic approach to our customers. This is not just a bunch of separate programs. These are integrated programs that really work to support our customers and support our right to clean water initiative that we passed. And so I like that attitude. And we're going to continue to watch and as these things progress and look for updates to this report today. I also am very encouraged. We've had these meetings in the past. Have not had a lot of community input, and I'm sure that wasn't just entirely organic. That I appreciate the staff reaching out and getting that input and encouraging it, and working with community leaders who have different perspectives, who have something to offer to us as a way to look at it, and a different, some ideas on how we can deal with it. I'm also clear that one of the challenges going forward is this push and pull. It's challenging to us as an agency to add more customers to the CAP program when it's not clear how we would pay for it. And so I'm hoping that Sacramento will help us with that, and that that the funding for this, it seems to have an increased perspective. It certainly has been great to have Wade Crowfoot move from the Water Foundation to the administration, and I'm hoping to see something there that we can support and encourage to help not just our agency and our district customers, but all customers that way. So thank you for a very informative workshop this morning. We'll now end this workshop and go to our closed session. Thank you.
Thank you.